0.1. The first rule of capitalism is simple. Theoretically, anyone can rise to the top. Practically, most people have to stay at the bottom. 0.2. Reason must be employed not merely as a way of thinking, but as a way of identifying ways of thinking. 0.3. One must learn to hear a claim and see 500 implications. So much reasoning finds its destruction in its logical conclusions. 0.4. All moral claims exist to serve the basis of reason. All moral claims exist to serve our capacity for pain and pleasure. A moral claim that better serves its purpose is a better moral claim. A tool that better performs its function is a better tool. 0.5. That which is firmly founded on the fundamental and the universal is itself fundamental and universal. 0.6. A society that is opposed to suffering is in the interest of one who can suffer. This is the most fundamental of moral maxims. 0.7. A wrong against one is a wrong against all. The undermining of respect for sentience, the corrosion of empathy and compassion, the normalization of cruelty and brutality. All who can suffer are the victims of such things. 0.8. Mass incarceration, a source of decimated communities, broken families, and fatherless homes. The solution to the crime of today must not lay the groundwork for the crime of tomorrow. 0.9. It is often assumed that the concept of toxic masculinity is somehow anti-man. This assumption is a falsity. The idea of toxic masculinity is not anti-man. The idea of toxic masculinity is a blueprint for the liberation of men. 1. To allow for the corporal punishment of children is to create a world where the obedience of the child is based not on respect, but instead fear. The relationship that a child has with a parent or a teacher should be founded on respect, not terror. To poison such relations with fear is an act of momentous evil. 1.1. There exist two fundamental and universal values, like of pleasure and dislike of pain. These fundamental and universal values can act as a foundation for moral claims that are themselves fundamental and universal. 1.2. Seneca proclaimed that we suffer more in thought than in reality. Yet we also feel more pleasure through thought than in reality. Or at least we can. Thought can induce both needless misery and much needed pleasure. 1.3. The idea that being moral sometimes requires that one do intuitively reprehensible things. A notion that has facilitated so much evil. A notion that has facilitated so much of the fight against evil. Killing was a reprehensible moral necessity in the eyes of both many of those who staffed the death camps and many of those who liberated them. 1.4. Simple reasoning serves us best. Overcomplicate your self-interest, and you will lose sight of it. Soon you will be undermining it. Excessive complexity leads to confusion, uncertainty, and disorientation. Overcomplicating our interests is not in our interests. 1.5. The desire to serve something greater. Social beings need a social purpose. The absurdity. We serve ourselves through serving others. Through serving others, we advance our fundamental interests and induce within ourselves high pleasures of meaning, fulfillment, purpose, contentment, and satisfaction. 1.6. One should not make moral judgments based upon how one would have acted in the situation. One should make moral judgments based upon how one should have acted in the situation. Being emotionally understandable and rationally defensible are very different things. Many things that should be criminal are emotionally relatable. Many things that are emotionally relatable are immoral. 1.7. The use of corporal punishment on children teaches them one lesson above all others: that violence and cruelty is acceptable, that violence and cruelty is a good way of solving problems and getting what you want. The strongest lessons are often the ones that are not stated. Sometimes an obvious implication leaves more of an impression than words ever could. 1.8. The most fundamental component of reality is not external but internal. It is one's capacity for pain and pleasure. We are sentient beings first and foremost. 1.9. People love nothing more than being convinced that they are right. A smart rhetorician will give someone a new idea by framing it as a natural extension of an old one. 2. Some smugly declare that reform always fails, as if the legacy of a revolution is not a handful of blood-soaked dictatorships. 2.1. Existence is eternal. What has been will always be part of the story of humanity and the fibre of reality. Nothing can ever change that. In a time and place, we are immortalized. We are part of reality, and we always will be. We are part of this story, and we always will be. 2.2. Unjustified and indefensible laws undermine the credibility and legitimacy of the legal system. They are not just evil. They corrode authority itself. They are the death of the state's claim to righteousness. They must be eliminated. 2.3. When it comes to the legacy of past wars, we face a great challenge. How do we respect and admire the sacrifices of soldiers without inadvertently glorifying and romanticizing war? 2.4. It is not overlooked in spite of its obviousness. It is overlooked because of its obviousness. Human attention gravitates towards the strange and the exceptional. 2.5. In debate, the most important thing is to never bite off more than you can chew. Never advance too far or fast. Advance only as far as you can defend your advance. Otherwise, a great victory may become a crushing defeat. 2.6. Reality can only be understood through abstraction. 2.7. If the right only applies when you do the right thing with it, then it is not a right, but a privilege. A right is the ability to do things that many consider to be wrong. Every right has its cost. It is not a right if you are only allowed it when you use it in a certain way. 2.8. We are not separate from reality. We are all pieces of reality. This world, reality's act of self-love, reality's act of self-harm. 2.9. The ascetic looks down on the hedonist, as though he is not also a follower of pleasure. In his case, the high pleasures of meaning, purpose, fulfillment, and satisfaction. Tell me that the ascetic does not feel these things, and I will tell you that no ascetic then exists. 3. Wrath and pride are deadly sins. Fail to worship me, and I will torture you for eternity. God does not lead by example. 3.1. Public political debate would be utterly pointless if only people understood that being correct and being rhetorically skilled are two different things.